So let's get started. I am Liz Arrington. I'm the co-founder and managing director of the GCV Institute and the architect of the GCV Keystone CVC benchmarking platform. In today's webinar, we'll be digging more deeply into the key roles that non-investing professionals, aka the platform team, play in driving strategic investment program charters, innovation goals, and performance. And we'll be looking at what differentiates CVC platforms from VC platforms. So we have a stellar panel made up of a combination of BD-focused platform professionals from two luminary CVCs, as well as a world-class VC. I will ask them to introduce themselves in a couple of minutes after I set the stage with some market context and data. So to start off, we're hearing that when raising capital from parent LPs, CVCs are increasingly being asked to include their impact strategy and plan as a key component of their pitches. So soon to be released GCV Keystone benchmarking research shows that 34% of all CVCs respond with integrated professional BD or platform teams that formalize approaches to internal and external ecosystem partnering and that operate in parallel with the investment teams. We see this percentage actually rises to 65% for CVC units that manage more than $300 million. The number of CVC programs with professional platform teams has risen significantly over the past few years, and our research shows that these teams are highly valued by both startups and parent partners. 80% offer business development resources, access to parent partners, to customer and supplier networks, to technical and scientific resources. 55% are respected as strategic innovation advisors to parent executives and business leaders. 40% provide project management office resources and actually funding for proof of concepts and pilots. 38% provide marketing and community development, and a quarter offer the dedicated operational and venture development support that you often see in VC platforms. But it's not just about the CVC portfolio. More than 2/3 of CVC platform teams also report a mandate to introduce companies that are strategically relevant to the parent, but that may not be portfolio companies or even investable for that matter. However, close to a quarter of lean CVC platform teams are laser focused on just serving the invested portfolio. At the same time, we see half of corporations also have technology scouting and innovation teams that have startup sourcing mandates, and 1/5 that have CVC platform teams also have separate venture client programs to work on partnering with startups that are not investments. And we see globally close to half of CVCs have these dedicated venture client programs. So corporations represent a target-rich but very complicated landscape for startups to navigate. The platform picture on the institutional VC side includes many of these same activities, but with somewhat different priorities. The trade group VC Platform has tracked the evolution of platform roles within VC firms and produced a report that shows that the VC platform function has professionalized, with over half of VC firms now having what they define as a moderate or significant platform team, and that the investment in platform teams correlates to better fund returns. Their data shows that VC funds that invest in both pre-investment and or post-investment platform services actually report a higher return multiple and net IRR. And as you can see here, they break the platform activities into two categories, pre-investment and post-investment. And as opposed to the CVC side, the VC platform starting point and the most prevalent activities are investment operations and marketing. But we've seen, particularly for the larger funds, post-investment activities have grown in importance in resourcing, with talent and business development being the key focus. So let's turn to our panel and explore what's the same and what's different for CVC and VC platform teams and how they might connect. So let's kick off the conversation with some panel introductions, starting with two CVC platform leaders who co-chair GCV's global CVC platform community of practice, along with Suzanne McElmore of EcoHealth Ventures. And then we'll move on to a representative of a storied VC firm that needs no introduction. So let's start with Geeta from TDK Ventures. Do you want to spend a few minutes introducing yourself and your firm?
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, I'll be happy to welcome everyone. I'm Geeta Dolakia. I'm the Portfolio Program Director at TDK Ventures, and I'm responsible for strategic engagements between TDK Ventures global portfolio companies and TDK global business groups. TDK Ventures is a corporate venturing arm of the Japanese conglomerate TDK that has core competencies in material science, electronic components, sensors, and batteries. As a CVC firm, we invest globally in early stage deep tech startups. So by early stage, I mean from seed to Series B. We are fairly young. We were incorporated in 2019, right just before COVID. We currently have 350 million in assets under management. The investment areas of our focus are in digital transformation and energy transformation. We have a 150 million fund specifically devoted to decarbonization with a investment focus in North America and Europe. Our primary interests in areas of investment are compute and connectivity, robotics, climate tech, next-gen materials, energy generation, and storage. As I speak, I think we are at 42 portfolio companies across the globe: US, Canada, Germany, India, China, and Singapore.
Sure. Do you want to introduce Shell Ventures to us and yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much, Liz. So my name's Tjerk Jastra. I'm heading up the what we call the business development team, the platform team in Shell Ventures. Shell Ventures is the corporate venture capital arm of the oil and gas company Shell, unsurprisingly. We've been around for 25 years, for quite some time though, and we're basically scattered around the globe. The main hubs are in the US, actually scattered there in Houston, Boston, and San Francisco, and Europe, which is London, and the Netherlands and Germany. Those are the three key ones there. And then in addition, we are based in also out of Beijing and Bangalore, because we see quite some interesting technologies coming out of those countries. We currently have about 100 companies in our portfolio, just over roughly 600 million invested, with a double that size fund still there. And we're basically looking at really supporting our powering progress strategy from the corporate. In general, it's really focused around energy transition, energy efficiency, reducing emissions, but also digital technologies that improve our processes, yeah, in general progress in help us reduce costs and etc. Overall, I think about 40 people globally. Well, that's a short intro. Thank you.
Thank you. Shanna, you want to tell us about yourself and NEA?
Yeah, hi, Shanna Hendricks, NEA. I've been with NEA at leading business development for about 10.5 years now. NEA has been around for 46 years. Depending on who you talk to, could be 47. But we currently are investing out of a $6 billion fund, and we invest globally. We have offices here in the San Francisco Bay Area, New York, as well as London. And we invest across segments. That includes enterprise, consumer, and healthcare. About 30 to 40% of our investments are in healthcare. And then the 60 to 70% is under enterprise, which is split between enterprise and consumer. Again, another 70-30 split. My role at NEA is to be the connective tissue, really, between our firm and our companies and corporates. And whether that's innovation teams, CVCs, C-level executives on the IT and technology side, heads of AI and data. We are the connective tissue for the purposes of commercial partnerships, co-sell agreements, strategic diligence and strategic investments, and then also thesis sharing and inspiration, if you will, for innovation teams globally.
Moving on to following under the slides that I presented a little earlier, looking at kind of the capabilities for the different platforms. Can I get each of you to quickly describe, how your platform team is organized and resourced? When was it created? How big is the team? What's the profile of the people that resource it? So Geeta, you want to go first again?
Sure. So I did mention that we are fairly young CVC, so we were incorporated in 2019. We had the platform and especially the portfolio engagement with the parent part baked into the program right in the beginning. But over time, as we have increased our portfolios geographically as well as in technology diversity, we have brought on additional team members. I myself joined TDK Ventures 3.5 years ago. I have 3 more team members working with me. So we are a team of 4, enabling collaborations between the portfolios. That is the startups that we have already invested in. The team is global as well. So I'm in the Bay Area and I have 1 more team member here, which is the headquarters. And we have 1 team member in Boston and 1 team member in London. We also have a startup team based in Tokyo, and they are responsible for looking at potential collaborations when the startups are in the due diligence stage by our investment team. Yes, that's the global spread. All of us come with technical degrees. All of us have PhDs. And our technical degrees are in alignment with our technical areas of investment. It just eases the discussions when you have to bring these rather nascent, cutting-edge technologies, describe it to our corporate parent and see how you can enable engagement.
Great. And I believe TDK also does have dedicated legal and financial and HR representatives as well, right?
Yes, so we have a pretty extensive platform team, and one part of the platform team is, of course, the engagement function with the parent and the portfolio. We also have what we call the scaling team that has marketing, HR, legal, and a whole lot of other host functions that they provide support for both for us and our portfolio companies. While most of the work that the engagement team does is between TDK and the portfolios, a lot of the support that the scaling team offers is for the portfolios.
Great. So Chair, tell us about Shell Ventures platform and business development capabilities.
Yeah, thanks. I think, like I mentioned, Shell Ventures was established about 25 years ago. However, the business development team was only established about around 2017 or so. So it's relatively young compared to the rest. Started off with one person and primarily focused on our upstream business because that's where we had most traction and most ask. But now these days we've grown to about 7 people spread around the globe, and very much so spread around the globe to cover the different businesses locally, but at the same time everyone has a different skill set, basically background skill set. So whether it's a technical background in one of our businesses, whether it be it upstream or downstream, or mobility or so, or is it more related to contracting and the supply chain and things like that. So we deliberately chose to make it a very diverse team, both from that perspective, from a trademark, so to say, perspective, as well as from a cultural background, in order to ensure that we basically can serve all the all the portfolio companies that we invested in that come from all over the world, but also all our businesses that have a very profound local capability or local content. That means that they are very, very much required to really know and understand how the culture in each place works. So that's a little bit what the team looks like. At the moment, we really try and serve all our businesses, and we've moved on from just the upstream business.
And you do on the operating side, Shell Ventures does have dedicated legal and financial resources as well, right?
Yeah, correct. So if you look at the functional side of that, we would like to say that we've got basically four groups of people. One is the investment professionals. It's us on the platform side, and it's definitely legal and financial support there. Yeah.
So tell us about what NEA's VC platform looks like.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. We run fairly lean. We have a team of 8 on the platform side total. And so that's a handful of marketing folks, handful of talent, and then I lead business development. And although I don't have a small team of business development, I consider all of the investors actually on the business development team, because when we are working with corporates or working with startups and corporates, I often bring the investors into the conversation to help kind of talk at a high strategic level and to also drive interest for diligence conversations, et cetera. So we've been around, the platform team has been kind of officially around for about 8 or 9 years. And for a portfolio size of 500 companies, and we've always been a large firm, that's not a very long time and it's not a large team. So we do as much as we can. And I'd say that we support the portfolio as a whole as much as we possibly can. So we often do events and such that is one-to-many versus one-on-one. So that's one way that we're most effective as a lean team.
On the CVC side, since you're lean but not quite as lean, do you have rules of thumb for the number of portfolio companies that each business development professional would support? Oh, sorry. Do you have rules of thumb for the number of portfolio companies per investment professional that each?
Yeah, so we do have something like that, but so generally speaking, we think about roughly 8 or so is what but it's it's definitely a rule of thumb because whenever a company is in a stage where you can really scale this across the entire group, that's when it takes so much more time to actually do that. Whereas in other cases, it's a fairly young company where we're really looking to do a proof of concept, and then that's a single project basically. So there's a lot less time involved in that particular case. So yeah, so you have to look at it a little bit from that perspective. It also really depends on how enthusiastic are some of your business stakeholders about the technology and about the project. So sometimes we find that they're so enthusiastic, they'll run away with it, and there's hardly anything we really need to do to support. And in other cases, it's they get pushed from the top, and we actually have to sort of help project manage some of this.
Right.
So it's it really depends, but rule of thumb 8.
Okay. What about Geeta? What about TDK? Do you have a rule of thumb for how many portfolio companies any one member of your team can work with?
So at this point, I think given that we are 4 of us, we have about ballpark 10 per head, you could say. But it's not the same level of support that is required for each and every one of those 10, right? Because some, when they are coming on board new and they have to be onboarded, And we have to work both with the parent as well as the portfolio to see how and where we can enable engagements that usually will start off as discussions and over time move over to pilots and hopefully proceed from pilots to commercial engagements. And finally, there is hopefully a first to market product coming out of that. So that's a very long process, and you don't need to spend the same amount of time at each part of that process. So if there are older portfolios that are already engaging well, then we just need to check with them periodically. And we do have a quarterly update to our parent on the status of engagements of all of our 42 portfolios. However, if they are either new and need to be onboarded, then you would spend a lot of time enabling that engagement. Also, as we all know, there will be situations where projects get stuck, projects need inputs from a strategic perspective, maybe from the ventures team. And so for those kind of special cases, we do end up spending a lot of time. I would also like to say that as we have kind of grown in experience and we have seen areas where we can see opportunities for improvement, we have been working closely with TDK Legal and TDK Corporate Management to ease some of the processes, such as, say, having a pot of money in between the year so that projects, if they start in the middle of the year and haven't been budgeted earlier, they can be funded, or to enable ease of agreements so that it's not too onerous and it has a start and a finish and it's time bound, so that the portfolio companies kind of have a view to how long this is going to be and what the next step is going to be. So it's so our role, I would say, is not just enabling the engagement, but also a lot of the ecosystem that makes the engagements happen far more efficiently.
Right. Well, we have a question that came up in the Q&A that relates to the business development services that you provide to the portfolio, and they want to know how you manage any conflicts of interest that arise in the provision of services to the portfolio companies.
Yeah,
So
I think
Geeta,
this
you
is
want to continue
of
on with that?
importance to both TDK Ventures and to Shell, right? Because we have a corporate parent that they may have their own R&D and their own products being developed. So in our case, it's very simple. We are separate from the parent, and we never pass on any proprietary information either to the parent from the portfolio and vice versa. So our mantra to the portfolios is always, you share what you feel like sharing with the parent directly, not through us. And then there are legal help on both sides, right? The portfolio has their own legal help, and we have a legal counsel in-house as well. And TDK has own. So there are enough checks and balances in place to avoid or even preclude a conflict of interest.
What about Shell, Cherk? How do you manage potential conflicts of interest?
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent question, because it's definitely one of the things that you have to be wary of all the time. So one of the key things that we do is we really help manage basically the conversation between the business and the portfolio company. But by the time it gets to commercial negotiations about a contract, we basically stay out. We step out and say, well, this is at arm's length. This is really between you and the portfolio company and the business, basically. What we did do, though, is we sort of prepared and implemented sort of standard type of contract. So with the contracting and procurement department, we sort of developed a sort of a standard type of contract specifically for portfolio companies. But on the details and the numbers that you will fill in, that's something that we completely stay out. And that the other thing that we do is that Shell Ventures will take board positions and But for the platform team, we'll make sure that they will not take board positions. We could take shareholder representative positions, but we'll never take a board position.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's move on and look at how we might compare and contrast the approaches that that NEA and the VC side take versus the CVC platform side on building and managing corporate networks and ecosystem relationships for business development. So you're one person, Shana. So how do you make the most of your limited time to build relationships and drive business development through, you know, ecosystems?
Yeah, we've played around with the strategy of it a couple times over the last several years. You know, we kind of went from kind of networking amongst the Fortune 500, which quickly grows into the Global 2000, especially after opening our London office. That starts to feel like a lot. And then, so then we dial that back to figuring out which corporates really have the reach across the most number of companies in our portfolio. So instead of going with one corporate relationship that's really only going to benefit one portfolio company of ours, we look to figure out who can really maybe benefit 5 portfolio companies of ours. And so then we start focusing more on the larger hyperscalers, for example. Consulting firms are a great way to access a lot of corporates. There's ultimately just this natural attrition that happens as well with corporates who kind of search our portfolio, realize maybe we're not aligned on where our investments are and where they need to be. And so they kind of fall off the relationship scale. I think we talked about previously, you know, when I first start working with a corporate, we're probably meeting 4 times a year. But after several years of that, then we probably dial that back to 1 or 2 times a year because we kind of understand a little bit of what they're looking for and what we are investing in and where the match is made there. So I think, you know, there's ways of being strategic. I think another learning that we've made over the years is, you know, you can't push a rope. And so getting signal from the corporate to us, kind of inbound interest or engaging back. And it's not just me, you know, pitching everybody saying, hey, you know, do you want to talk to us? Maybe they might say yes, but then it kind of dies out or fizzles. And that's really motivated because they're not motivated to engage with us. Maybe their team, you know, we're lucky that Shell and TDK have a great team to support that. Some corporates just don't have a team to do that. Some cultures just aren't built to innovate through startup partnership or acquisition. So, you know, navigating the corporates to figure out where there's signal and who has interest and who has bandwidth to support this kind of a relationship is also really helpful to kind of weed out and really focus on which corporates to partner with.
And who are typically your targets within a corporation?
Yeah, you know, it's changed over the last decade. When I first started doing this, it was CIOs and CTOs pretty exclusively. The CISOs would start to come, but then CISOs by nature are fairly reserved and tend to want to do their own research. And then, you know, what I've found on our side was the CIOs were coming and excited, but really focused more on crisis mode, getting, you know, the IT running in the company. And so we started seeing these VP of innovation roles come up. And so then it was the VP of innovations who we were talking to, VPs of innovation, excuse me, that we were talking to. Those teams started turning into CVCs or would engage with the CVCs. And now, since a lot of innovation does feed through the CVC, whether it's an investment or just from a strategic partnership, then I now work with a lot of CVCs. So it's pretty broad, honestly, the target of who it is, and it's changed over the years, and I'm sure it will change again. You know, there was no head of AI up until 2 or 3 years ago, and so that has become a huge target for us as well. Also, you know, really for diligence as we're investing in these AI companies, and we're wondering who's buying AI and how are they implementing AI into the corporate enterprise. that's also interesting for us to talk to heads of data and heads of AI as well. So it's broad now.
And do you play a role in providing market input to the development of investment themes, or are you part of the diligence and deal development process?
Yeah, I support the diligence process by making connections. So if we're investing in a company and we know we want to talk to a certain persona or a certain industry vertical, then I will come in and support that as best I can. I think the other involvement I think that I bring is hearing and understanding from the corporates what they're focused on or what areas that they're looking to solve for. I provide that feedback to the investors so that they know, oh, maybe there's a trend that's happening here across financial services, for example, that everybody's starting to look for this, example, wealth management tools are really big right now as far as what can AI do from a wealth management support standpoint. So that's, an example of a trend, and we're very careful not to share, of course, across corporates, and we keep everything very siloed. So there's a lot of trust that happens there, but I realize, that there needs to be a little bit of sharing in order for things to be productive.
Right. So Geeta and Cher, can you kind of contrast your approach to developing both your corporate and your ecosystem relationships? I'd imagine it's a little more top down, bottom up. Geeta, you want to go first?
Yes. So as a young CVC, we do realize that there is a lot of education to be done even into the corporate. So while it's easier at the upper management and the corporate leadership level, the people that we engage with within the business groups, sometimes we do have to bring out the value of engaging with portfolio companies, bring out the value of spending time and effort into pilots and NREs and JDAs, right? So there is a lot of that to be done. But what we have that has kind of eased even our work is the concept of equal win, which is something that Shan also alluded to. So if both the portfolio company and the business group needs to see value in that relationship or in that collaboration, or it will not move forward. And so we always look to see if there is an equal win possibility. And if not, we have to take the signal from the stakeholders. We have a very structured way of introducing our portfolios to the corporate. And our corporate is also organized into verticals. It could be components, it could be energy, it could be sensors. So based on where the portfolio strength is, we know whom to knock on the doors of within the corporate. And when we do that a few times, they know the process and they know how to engage. So that streamlining definitely helps us. As they start to engage, there will always be hesitations if it's being done for the first time. Those challenges do have to be overcome with communication. That's the key in this job, actually. And what we have also noticed is that bringing people under the roof in this day of constant Zoom calls, having people in a room where they can talk to each other is extremely valuable. So for the last 2 years, we have been putting together what's called the Portfolio Summit, where we bring all of our portfolio companies and as many TDK corporate leaders and business groups as possible to spend a whole day talking to each other, looking at product showcases, having panels, and all of this goes to educating both the newer portfolios on the value that we bring as a CVC, and also opens the eyes of the corporate on the value of engaging with portfolio companies. And this is something that we have found to be extremely valuable.
And these are both executive and operational level people?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Sure. Tell us a little bit about how you manage this at Shell. And then I think in particular that you do quite a bit of work on looking at proof of concepts and pilots. And we have a question in the Q&A about insights on engaging with the businesses and designing and monitoring proof of concepts.
Yeah, so there's a few questions in here, but let me try and answer all of them. How do we engage with these with the business? I think there's three things that I want to point out. One is we've got a fairly structured way of basically approaching our businesses that we know of that would need some of these solutions. Sometimes we don't know that they need a solution, but we have a good structured way of introducing them, getting, like Gita was mentioning, getting them into one room, talking to each other, finding out what are the opportunities really with these companies. So that sort of starts with individual conversations, and then ultimately workshops and things like that. Second thing that we do is we run a monthly Know Your Startup series, which we basically is similar like this, a webinar where we get one portfolio company to present themselves to a global audience, and basically in a very short time period pitch basically what they're doing, and then that gives them quite a sizable audience. And then third, we piggyback a lot on what our corporate businesses, our business functions are doing in the different bigger conferences. So when we sponsor as a corporate a big event or part of or have a stand somewhere, we always try to piggyback on the back of that, bring along, let's say, half a dozen or a dozen portfolio companies that are relevant for that space, and then we use that situation to sort of introduce them to the right face-to-face with the right people in our own company, but also use the network that they have locally with other companies in these areas to actually to introduce them also to others, sometimes our customers and things like that.
And
yeah, and sorry, to coming back to those proof of concept, because one of the things that all the way in the beginning is that when we identify these the opportunities, and the proof of concept or scaled rollout is an important element of that. We basically really try and help out to identify what it is that this proof of concept is trying to solve. So we upfront really crystal clear say what are the success criteria for this, and it's really important to do this because especially if it takes a bit of long time, people's understanding of what the success criteria were could change. So be crystal clear about it up front. And then, we basically help them across all along, and then including writing up the insights and that come from that. And then we try to share that with the business again. So we circle that back basically. For the business obviously is involved in some of these proof of concepts, so they know some of that as well, but we help them write it up, and we also then bring it along beyond that particular business, because sometimes it may be, for instance, interesting for upstream, but it could also be of interest to downstream. They might not talk to each other, but we do. So
and like Gita, I think you have kind of a slush fund that you can use if needed to support proof of concepts or respond to kind of off budget timeframes, right? So Turk, within Shell, you also have the budgets.
Yeah, we do. We do have a fund like that obviously tries to be the lube oil to get some of these proof of concepts over the line, especially where the proof of concept do have inherently some extra startup costs associated with that. But we try to sort of cover that. We never pay the entire thing, so the business does need to put some money on the table as well. But funny enough, we seldom need to use it. We offer it, and then by the time when push comes to shove, we seldom use it.
Good.
I just want
So,
to clarify that TDK Ventures actually doesn't have a slush fund. So
okay.
it's all coming from the corporate when it comes to engagements with the portfolios. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, Shanna, we were talking the other day about interesting companies that are not portfolio companies. What is your approach to working with pipeline or with companies that that may be interesting but are not part of the portfolio?
We are supportive. The platform team here is supportive of working with pipeline companies. However, I will say it comes down to being a bandwidth issue, to be honest. We are, like I said, lean team. So we are working with the portfolio companies we do have. I think it can be a great marketing/sales tool, honestly, for a firm. NEA has been around for a long time, but not a lot of people have heard of us, especially new founders maybe who haven't been kicking around Silicon Valley for 20 years. They kind of think maybe NEA is like old and stodgy. And so when we can come in and help with talent or business development and make some potential customer intros, that can be really helpful to our investors who are, trying to win a deal, especially in this competitive landscape that we're in. We do have to be careful not to burn our bridges, I think, a little bit, right? We get so many asks a year from these corporate partners that we've built relationships with, and we want to save a lot of those asks for the companies currently in our portfolio. So in some cases, and this is where working with CVCs is especially helpful, is their mandate, the CVC mandate, is to help and find new companies. And so there's more, it's an easier ask, and there's more flow of information from us to the CVC versus us to a CIO, for example. And so that's one reason I love working with the CVCs, to be honest, is because there is this vested interest in, hey, if you guys are excited about a company, maybe we should be excited about this company, or, maybe one day we'll be an investor in this company as well. And so having that kind of conversation is really helpful to being able to support the pipeline companies, if you will.
Absolutely. So, Cherk, how do you, how at Shell Ventures, how do you deal with companies that are not portfolio companies?
Yeah, I think Shauna actually touched on it already. It's a bandwidth. It is a bit of a bandwidth issue. I mean, I mentioned that we have sort of, like say, 8 companies that we can support per person. We've got 7, that's 56, and then we've got 100 in our portfolio. So there is a little bit of a limitation of what we can and cannot do. Having said that, it doesn't mean that we will not just put them in touch with the business. But the amount of support that we will provide is a bit limited. But there's very often, there's definitely cases where we decided not to invest in a certain company, but it's nothing to do with the fact that the technology is not good or the team is not good or whatever. It could actually be a brilliant company, but we just don't, for other reasons, do not invest. Certainly in those cases, we will certainly put them still in touch with the business. And actually, if we seriously looked into them for investment, we have already put them in touch with the business. So that doesn't stop them from continuing that.
So, Geeta, what about with TDK Ventures? How do you address companies that are not portfolio companies or may not even be investable?
Yeah, I mean, we have 3 criteria for our investment. So it should be IPO type mega fund returner. So that's on the investment side. And then there should be a good strategic fit. So that's on the strategic side. And they should generally be a company that is doing good, right? Is societally bringing value. Those are our main criteria, investment criteria. So even during the due diligence phase, that's what we look for. And I also mentioned that we are an early stage investor, so C to Series B, and we may come across fantastic companies that are not fitting any of these bills, but would be a great fit for the corporation and could be a partner for the corporation, could be a supplier for the corporation. So we do have a team that assesses that, and like everybody here said, bandwidth certainly has to be considered. and number of times you knock on the corporate's door has to be considered. But if there is a great potential fit, we have a process in place to introduce them to our corporates. Yeah. And they can also go into pilots. And if everything is all the check marks are met, then they can go into commercial agreements as well.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, we have probably about half to 2/3 of the questions in the chat are about performance and performance metrics and value. And so if I could get each of you to talk about how within your organization you measure and communicate the value of the platform team in your work, and how do you reward performance? So Shanna, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I hope I'm not disappointing anybody with my answer, but we've tried many ways of measurement and KPI tools. I think, and I can walk quickly through kind of our thinking around how we measured each one. I think where we've decided ultimately to spoil the ending is really just number of intros and impact of the intro to the company and potentially the firm. 10 years ago, I thought, well, if we could prove, the value of this intro and they get an invoice from this company and this turns into this many millions of dollars, and then that returns this much millions of dollars to the fund. Like, what a great way to capture value. The challenge with that becomes, and this is true for any kind of measurement that goes beyond the initial introduction, is none of that really is beholden to me or my role. So if I was to connect you, Liz, with Geetha at TDK, and Liz didn't show up for the meeting, or Geetha was having a bad day and there was just something off about the meeting and it didn't go anywhere, that reflects poorly on me if my KPI is, did that meeting turn into a POC, for example. However, there is still this kind of involvement that I maintain, which is, hey, how did the meeting go? When's the next meeting? Oh, it didn't go well. All right, let's see if we can figure out why it didn't go well and who we can bring in instead, for example. So there is some still influence that I can have, but beyond whether or not the corporate is ready for a POC, or the budget's not there for a corporate to have a POC, or the POC didn't work because it turns out the CIO's brother was a startup that does something the same, right? Like, these are all things that we can't influence. So it was hard to measure beyond that. So at the end of the day, we're looking at number of intros. We're pretty good about reporting out kind of on an ongoing basis, anything big that you've done or happened or conversations we've had. And this is true for the talent team, for the marketing team across. We all sit in on all the big team meetings and investor meetings on Mondays and Fridays. So we have a platform to talk about that. And then at the end of the year, of course, it's mostly just kind of summarizing all of that and putting that down on paper and making sure that we're capturing all of the great things that we've done for the year.
Okay, so it's kind of the activity metrics plus storytelling around big successes.
That's right. Yeah, the storytelling is the ongoing piece of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Geetha, what about you? How do you measure the value and success of the platform team? And
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a challenging question as well, because as we have evolved as a CVC, our metrics have changed. When we were very young, we were measuring things like how many TDK teams across geographies did you get to know. TDK is so vast, more than 100K employees, so many business groups spread across the globe. So how many people did you get to know? And then maybe how many NDAs were signed? And over time, it has moved to more tangible goals. So we have the concept of what moves the needle, and it could be moving the needle for the portfolio, or it could be moving the needle for TDK. So we now, of course, like most CVCs, measure number of pilots, number of JDAs, NREs, material transfer agreements. But we also have other metrics beyond these, like was there any learning? either did the if the CVC is or if the corporate parent enables the portfolio to learn something in a new space because they work with a lot of customers, they have a lot of that technical knowledge, and a new portfolio company might actually benefit from that. So we enable things like webinars to enable those things. So we do measure those learnings as well, and also things like, did this engagement with the portfolio enable a new project inside the corporate to either begin, which could be not just with the portfolio, it could be just learnings about a very new cutting edge space, a nascent space that is sparking somebody who's a venture agent within the corporate, and that person goes ahead and starts a new project that could perhaps end up being $1 billion business in the future for the corporate. So those kind of things, did it enable something to stop? We have had cases where there was an internal project, and then after meeting a couple of portfolio companies, the corporate team realized that, okay, what they're doing is so far away from what's out there. So it's better to stop, allocate resources, both personnel as well as cash reserves to other more appropriate things. So all of these are counted as well. But it is still very challenging. And we'll know more as we evolve and we iterate on this. I'd also say that it's important to have team metrics that help each other. So the investment team, success in this role requires working closely with the investment team as well. And so the metrics that enable that kind of a collaborative work are valued as well. So that's where we are currently.
So you're tracking assists in some way.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what about so Shell and Chuck, what are you measuring? And I know you have more engagement with the business, so maybe is there more of a commercial impact orientation as well?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I think there is well, I think inherently we are a sort of an engineering company, so we like data. So that's we have quite a few, but the most important ones that we're measured against is really the value that we deliver to the bottom line, and we cannot always measure it very accurately for everything. But we definitely try. So we definitely try to measure this. And the starting point for a lot of that is that if a business signs a contract with a certain company, apparently there is a certain value associated with that beyond the contract value. I mean, it's an investment, and therefore there should be a return. And at the minimum, there is our own threshold basically that we need to make. But in honestly, I think we really try to measure the real benefits to this. So there are cases where we have developed new revenue streams that are easy to measure, and there are cases where we really see costs of certain projects go down that we can really measure. And I think there's been a mentor of mine years ago once said was that you earn the right to your job during the good times, so that you can stay in that job during the bad times. And I think that's sort of something that stuck with me, because I think what it means is that just keep measuring your what you deliver, what you perform, how you perform, because every time, and corporate venture capital groups will have that tendency to go through these cycles of where say, yeah, you're absolutely great, and then the next person comes in and starts asking questions. Hey, hold on a second, is this really something that we need to do? Is this core business? Do we need to continue? Just the fact that, yeah, I mean, being able to showcase consistently year after year that you have been measuring and performing and delivering real value is an easy way to basically justify your existence. And I think the fact that we've been around for 25 years is proof that has helped, basically. So
all right, well, we are just about out of time, so I'd like to ask each one of you to kind of step back and give us your one piece of advice for really making your function impactful. So Shana, you want to go first?
Sure. I think The piece of advice that I give a lot of my peers, or, I speak at the VC platform conference every year as well. And I think the piece of advice that I would give is that to remember that this is a relationship business. I think it can feel very transactional, especially when it comes down to who's writing a check and who's cashing the check. But I think at the end of the day, we're all people, and we're all trying to make sure AI doesn't take our jobs away. But I think at what I think the investors need to remember also, and might not be top of mind for them, is these are bridges we don't want to burn. These are relationships that we want to nurture, and that takes time. And just like the sales cycle takes time, right? And we're not going to be able to get a KPI from an intro we make 6 months from now, probably. And we're not going to be able to see the value out of a relationship that we make 6 months ago for the first time. And so patience, I think, is really critical in this role.
Yeah, absolutely. So Geeta?
I think for people in this role already, right, within a CVC or maybe even a VC, like what Shanna said, this is a very, you need to take a long-term view. All of this takes establishing relationships, sometimes overcoming challenges, seeing very early stage portfolio engage with the corporate, and taking a nascent discussion through the whole phase into a commercial contract. These things take time, so patience is of course critical. I would also say that it's very important for the people in this role to be very abreast of technology, because technology keeps changing. I mean, we didn't know about LLMs being such a big thing and absolutely appending the area of AI 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So you have to be abreast of technology. You have to be very good at delivering message, whether it is externally, whether it's to the portfolio, or whether it's internally. And I would also say that it's good to encourage people from diverse backgrounds to get into this role. I myself, in my former life, was a scientist, and then from there I moved on to SBIR at NASA, which is where I got the whole breadth of the different technologies that can potentially exist, which then brought me into this. And over the course of the last couple of years, I've been speaking to a lot of people in this role, and I'm amazed at how many different pathways there are, from sales to intel and innovation to deep technical roles that can benefit this, and each one brings their own different perspective that adds value to this role. So that would be my advice to people who want to get into CVC and who are outside of it right now, to consider this as an option and not just say, okay, I will be a technical person inside a corporate.
Yeah. Yeah. Chuck, do you have one piece of advice?
Well, I think the first piece of advice was given before, is that pre-measure your success. I think that is long term, that's going to help you. I think the other piece of success that I'll touch on is a lot of these, especially hardware technical investments. Sales cycles take a long time. 12 to 18 months is not unheard of. If you only build up that relationship that both Geeta and Shanna were referring to, with only one person in the business that is behind this project, you're going to bound to find out that some of your projects are getting stopped because people move out and go to the next one, and the next person might not be as enthusiastic about this technology and this project as someone else is. So once you've got the first person in the business that is enthusiastic about it and really wants to bring this forward, go and find the second one, because that will create that longevity, or at least the continuity that you need. So people will move on, and it happens every day. So you need to build in your own continuity.
Well, wonderful. Well, I want to thank the panel so much for your time and your insights. And I'm sorry that we didn't get to everyone's questions, but I would encourage those of you who want to dig into this topic in more detail. Geeta and Cherk and I will all be at the Monterey, at the GCVI Monterey Summit in March, and we'll be running a Chatham House session, which will give people an opportunity to dig into these topics in more detail. So, I would encourage you to think about joining that session and joining that event. We would welcome you. Just as a quick follow-on, our next webinar that we'll be doing on February 19th, we'll be looking at, despite all of the upheaval and the challenging news, we'll be looking at, is now actually the right time to be investing in autonomous driving? So we welcome you joining us for that session. We do encourage you, as I said, to mark your calendars for GCV's flagship CVC gatherings in Monterey and in London. We will be having, as I said, Chatham House sessions digging into both operations and platform topics. And then for those of you who live in Chicago area, the Midwest, or Sao Paulo, we will be having GCV Connect events in February. And we have a number of busy schedule of spring courses coming up, with both live online cohorts of our foundational CVC investment programs course happening in January and April. And then if you are more interested in digging into end-to-end investing and platform strategies and best practices, we have our Landing the Value of Corporate Venturing program, which includes a mentored challenge project that will kick off in early April. And thank you for joining us. We welcome, we hope you enjoyed the discussion, and we welcome any feedback. Please do fill out the survey, and we will hopefully look forward to seeing you at future events or at next month's webinar. And feel free to reach out editorial to Maya Palmer, professional development and benchmarking. You can reach out to me, or for any commercial considerations, reach out to Jimmy Gunnell. So thank you again for joining us. We're glad to have you and hope you enjoyed it.